I have been a follower, like I've known about, I'm in my mid-60s, and I think I've been surrounded by God talk, church talk, been in churches, all that. But legitimately, it wasn't until I was 18 years old that I would say I actually surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, that I gave up thinking I could be good enough for whatever God had for me, and actually could look in a mirror, know I wasn't, and receive the grace of God. Grace of God. Grace means to get something I didn't earn or deserve, and receive it and start to be changed by it. Okay, and that was 44 years ago. Okay, and I remember then. What I still remember now, or think about now, is there's always been this piece of, or this fear, or this underlying insecurity, that if I really did just give my life to a God this Bible says loves me, that I would lose more than I would gain. That somehow like, I got to die to self. I got to take up my cross. Everyone else is more important than me. My needs don't matter. Their needs are more important than mine. And if I really just said, Lord, my life is yours, that my life would be okay. But truthfully, it wouldn't. Like, it would be be a B team life. Like, I really wouldn't flourish, and life wouldn't be rich, and I wouldn't have some of the things I want. And so there's always been this sense to where if I really want to follow Christ, where I think he's going to lead me, there's this fear that he's going to lead me to less, okay? And I guess what I'm saying that is, what I haven't been able to make sense of is this inherent, I think, healthy self-interest. That wasn't made just to go eat dust and die, but was actually made to flourish. It was made to flourish and to live. And I'm afraid that if I surrender my life to the God that made me to flourish, that his plan for me is not to flourish. His plan for me is I won't matter, my needs won't matter, and I'm going to be last. And by the way, I'm supposed to like it. I'm supposed to like it. The acronym you heard, maybe some of you heard, like JOY, Jesus, others, yourself, like, or Jesus, others, you. Like, you're nowhere near the pecking order, which means you're always going to get the scraps.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about something that is scary to talk about. I'll just say it this way, in evangelical circles largely, and it sounds like heresy. It sounds like secular humanism. It sounds like, New Age or something like that. But here's what you're saying, Jeff, is so gospel-centered. We tend to think in terms of external circumstances. Sometimes we'll shame ourselves by saying, well, no, it's not all about flourishing. What about people that are suffering? What about people that are under persecution? And that's not at all to soft pedal that, but when you read the testimonies, scripture and otherwise, we're not talking about outward flourishing. We're not talking about prosperity, first world, third world, second world, whatever. We're talking about an internal recognition of the abundance of following Jesus. And we have these things we say in Scripture. People say, die to self, deny yourself. And what if those things meant, I'm asking you, I'm commanding you, I'm letting you know that what my disciples do, Jesus speaking, what my disciples do is they make sure they're allowing me to get rid of all the false roles and ego things we put in front of us to keep ourselves away from vulnerability. So maybe it's not deny your desire to flourish. Maybe it's deny the ego you live in and the false roles you live in to create your own flourishing.
Wow. That in some ways I can turn all that biblical language into I'm also not going to have any needs. Because my needs don't matter.
It's all about myself.
And then if I do anything to even be needy and to have a need to have those needs met, that's selfish, self-centered, and inherently ungodly. It's not Christian, that somehow I need to kill all that. Problem is you're trying to kill the thing in you that you're actually, it's almost unkillable, which is I'm made to live.
Yes.
The question is, what is living? I just remember this. I remember when my oldest son Jay was a teenager, I took him to a part of the world. Okay, I can't even say where it was. Okay, but it's the part of the world where there's just still significant persecution if you follow Jesus, especially for church leaders. And I had my son in a circle with about 30 church leaders in this country. And one by one, they were telling their stories through translators. And at one point, the question was asked, raise your hand if you've been in and out of prison because of your following Jesus or your leadership in the church. And every hand went up. And the stories they told were horrific, okay? Horrific. And I remember my son watching these men that had come from they came on bikes and motorcycles, and we're sitting on the ground. I mean, I'll just tell you, I can't tell you where we were, but I remember my son saying to me, Dad, he couldn't reconcile this. These guys had nothing. They had some of them have had their houses burned down. They'd been run into the jungle. It's crazy. He said this quote, Dad, I see a Jesus in these guys that I have never seen. Mm-hmm. Had nothing, but were flourishing.
Yes.
Okay, and so there is a what we describe as flourishing. I think is sometimes confusing. Mm-hmm. That we think somehow we have this image of what that looks like. That I know I get confused by it, and then I read Bible verses that confuse me. Like at one point we're said that Jesus is our example, Philippians chapter 2, that he emptied himself and put everything down, and I'm supposed to follow him into that. And yet it also says after that, then what did God do? What did God do with Jesus when he laid himself down? He actually exalted him. Or you read in Hebrews 11 where it says we got to believe that God is a rewarder of those who seek him, that there's actually a reward in seeking him. Mm-hmm. Or I love this one. This is in Ephesians 5. We're talking to husbands. It says, husbands, love your wives, okay? It says, because love your wives as you love yourself, because no man hated his own body, but nourishes it. Like you're going to eat and you're going to take care of yourself because you know you matter. So in some ways, the most selfish, the most self-serving, not self-centered. See, the language is hard. The most self-interested thing I could do is actually love my wife. Mm-hmm. Because also that's what my life looks like now, because I'm with a woman who's being loved, and that's who I get to live with.
Yes.
And so there's always this contrast between dying to live and then what is really living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Paul says, well, I'll tell you what, part of what that is that godliness with contentment is great gain. It's great flourishing. If you want to flourish, then the word contentment there is akin to being able to contend, to be able to live in the truth with the tension of, I live here, I'm not home yet, but that doesn't mean I'm called to be miserable. It may mean I'm called to suffer. But it may not mean I'm called to be miserable, which means back to that idea of, well, I've got to make myself miserable. I have to live in deprivation. I have to make sure that if I have any interest in my own flourishing whatsoever, I got to shame myself out of it.
Or at least with asceticism, that somehow it's more godly if I could deny any of my humanness. Mm-hmm. Okay, we see, that's way over here. Here's what I know for me. It's been a huge breakthrough is too strong of a word, because it didn't happen like a breakthrough. It's happened incrementally, where I've had to grow more comfortable with what does it look like? What does it look like for me to pay attention to my needs and that not feel selfish to me? Yet in reality, if I don't pay attention to what I might have a need of, then I don't even have the resources I need to care for the people around me I'm supposed to be dying for, mm-hmm. or giving my life away for. Mm-hmm. And so I know for most of my life, I so hammered the I'm going to lay it down, I'm going to, I don't matter, everyone else matters more than me, that was unsustainable, to the place where then I had so many people. My family was growing. I had a wife now. My leadership role was challenging. I had people that needed me. I started running out of resources to give these people because I had deprived myself of even what I needed on the inside to even have anything to offer them, because my needs were always secondary to the needs of anyone around me.
Yeah, and ironically, what you're describing leads to a feeding of the ego.
Okay. I knew where this was going to go. Yeah,
I'm
go
such
ahead.
a servant.
Yeah.
I'm laying it down. I'm living sacrificially. I'm losing sleep. I'm all these things. And that's not to mock. I mean, we're both pastors and former vocational pastors. That's not mocking serving a congregation, serving a flock. What it's mocking is when I try so hard to live in deprivation because I think that's what Scripture means when it says die to the self, that I end up feeding ego because of what a servant I am, how much I suffer.
Okay, so do this. Talk about what does it mean to die to self? What is the self we're dying to?
Yeah.
Because it's not die to my neediness. It's not die to my humanness. It's not die to how I'm made. Okay. If you've listened to any of these podcasts, you can just tell you that's not what we're talking about here. But I don't think that's what the Bible says. But what does it then mean to die to self? What's the self we're dying to?
If you look at how Jesus operated, just day in and day out with people, with humanity, his disciples, with Luke highlights. He loves to highlight outsiders. Back in that day, women, tax collectors, prostitutes, the outcast, lepers, like he loves highlighting how Jesus dealt with those who in that culture were looked down on and people that were looked up to. How did he deal with those people? And notice how when the people that came to him in neediness, self-serving, like the blind man, if we take it to the extreme, several blind people, one of the blind people came to him asking to be healed. That was self-serving. Those people wanted to see.
Yeah.
And lepers that came to him to be healed, they wanted to be healed of leprosy. And so they came with great need and said to him, I want to live. I'm unable to live this way. And so Jesus, with great compassion, Mark chapter 1, there's a leper that comes to him and says, if you want to, you can heal me. And it says Jesus, with great pity, means he was viscerally moved, said, I want to, and did that. And then when you see the people that were not living in that kind of neediness, Jesus is very angry about that. And so we come to this kind of, I mentioned it earlier, this kind of culminating verse. In Luke 9:51, it said, Jesus resolutely turned toward Jerusalem. So he literally turned, but then geographically, but then was set his face like flint to go to the cross. A few verses, I can't do the math, 9:23 and 9:51, he says, I'm going resolutely to Jerusalem. We're headed to the cross, boys. In 9:23, he says, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourself, take up your cross daily, follow me. And I, for years, lived in that, you said the word asceticism. I lived in that asceticism that I thought that meant if it's anything to do with human flourishing and it doesn't cost me a great deal of suffering or martyrdom, then I'm not denying myself. If I have any pleasure, if I'm what we call now self-care, if I'm resting, if I'm not really pouring it out for someone else or for God, quote unquote, I'm not denying myself. And then as I've grown and read and prayed and changed, I was like, what if, and I believe it does mean this when I say what if, when he says deny yourself, he's saying, if you got things that prop you up, even your servanthood, if you've got things that prop you up, if you've got a role you're playing where you are not being yourself, which means you're going to be really needy on me and you're going to have needs and you're going to desire to live. If you've got anything in the way of that, get rid of it. Deny that. Don't live that way. How will you know you're living that way? Well, when you carry around in your heart, obviously doing a metaphor, taking up your cross, when you live in such a way to say, I'm going to live fully, I'm going to tell the truth of my insight, where I am, who I am, denying the ego and the false self, that's going to automatically put me metaphorically under that cross because I've died to the power I get to having a false role. I've died to the power that I get out of this ego. And as Peter said, I got nowhere else to go. I'm following him.
Okay. hit pause if you're listening to this or watching this. Go back 5 minutes and listen again to what Phil just said, what you just said. I just heard that may have been like crystallized cappuccino, espresso. There's no milk in there and there's no chocolate. That's not a mocha. Like that was like what you just now said there about what it means to die to self, dying to ego, dying to all the stuff I actually do to prop myself up, to not have to be in a place of surrender or brokenness or neediness, which goes back to, if I am needy, that also means I do need care. Because needy people, actually, by definition, a human being's needy. We're denying really our humanness when we don't think we need it. But when we deny our neediness, or we're ashamed of it, we miss it. We actually miss the opportunity to have our needs met and to actually experience any kind of flourishing, having nothing to do with our physical circumstances.
Yeah.
I just know for me, I go back to this why I want us to talk about this, is I am still, and I watch guys deal with this, is still on this journey of walking into having to confront what feels sometimes selfish to me. I use that word on purpose. It feels selfish to me to do something that actually takes care of me. And the take care of me is rooted into finally realizing that I actually do have some real legitimate needs. Now some of my needs aren't legitimate. I go back to, I don't want to start listing them, I write them in my journal. But I just go, one of the most vulnerable, surrender things I can do is actually be open to having real needs met. Mm-hmm. And the more I've learned to do that legitimately with the right things that actually do meet needs, we can talk about that as we go and maybe do another podcast on it or talk about it today. I find I have a whole lot more to offer everybody around me that really does come to me and want me to offer them something. Mm-hmm. I know in our profession, we're both licensed therapists, pastors, disciple guys, mentor guys, do all that. I don't trust anybody in our kind of work who is not also having somebody help them in some capacity. There's some ways that I'm in some kind of recovery work, or someone is helping me to continue to peel my own onion. Because if I'm not doing that, I have nothing to offer anybody else. Mm-hmm. Because if my needs aren't being met, I have nothing. I'm giving out of nothing.
Or you will be meeting your own needs, which feeds the ego, which is the thing Jesus is saying to deny.
There you go. Say more about what that looks like.
Yeah, it is a very humbling experience. Has been a humbling experience for me. You and I have a mutual friend, lives out in Texas, where I have grabbed the phone and called him and said, "Man, I'm kind of a mess. I have, at my age, Eric Erickson, the theorist, he said that when you get to the part of life you and I are in, Jeff, it's like you either look back on your life with integrity or despair. Look back and go, oh, this mistake and that mistake, and I find myself ruminating on that a lot. And so what I end up doing, if I'm not sharing that with somebody, if I'm not picking up that phone or talking to you or someone that I trust and that I know loves me, what I end up doing is becoming my own solution. So I'll go, okay, well, I regret this mistake and this decision, that decision, so I'm going to work hard now to undo that decision or to compensate for it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to overserve, overwork, over this, over that, give up, move into apathy. So talking to other people does something to the nervous system, first of all. We've talked about the language of feelings, tells the story that's living in the right brain, bringing language from the left brain. So my nervous system goes down. And as I hear myself tell the story of where I am to you, to my friend, to someone that I trust, that's allowing me to have the humility to ask for what I need, to make confession of my neediness, which is in fact denying the false role I would love to live in to compensate for it myself.
help me. Actually, I don't know if I want to open this can without us having a fresh start time-wise, because what I want to talk about, and maybe we save it, is the difference between self-care and escape, indulgence, what actually is selfish versus what actually, in some case, the most selfless thing I can do is to make sure in appropriate ways I'm being replenished.
Yes.
And I think that's what I watch a lot of guys I work with, but I know in my own life, I go, that's what I'm kind of working through. I remember when I first kind of stepped into some of this, okay, to have to confront how much ego I had in my self-denial. And then what was happening was the human heart is still so wanting to live. I heard described once like that the human heart is like grass under an asphalt driveway. Like it'll bust up concrete or asphalt because it's going to try to live.
Yes.
And so for me, what was happening was my heart was finding other escapes, other places to go where I felt alive. I describe it this way, and if you're watching, you can see it. But if you're listening, I'm holding up one spread out hand. I bring the other hand right up to it, and I go, I'm made like this, and I'm made for this. Okay? If I don't find this, I will settle for this because it feels close enough.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And I'll go back to this. If a needy human being that's in need of connection, attachment, flourishing life, what feels like life, okay, and Jesus offered it. He said, I came to give you an abundant life. Okay. If I'm not finding that, or even in some ways I'm actually willfully think that the model I'm supposed to follow, the path I'm supposed to walk down, is a denial of anything that feels like that, my heart's still going to go find a place that somewhere feels like I'm alive. And that's where I got into trouble with sex addiction. That's what I've just gone down paths where stuff just started leaking out to go, something's got to feel alive, because everything else it started feeling like eating shredded wheat with no milk. Like I was just eating sand. And it felt like the Christian thing to do, but I was dying inside. And so stuff started coming out sideways that really goes all the way rooted back to some paths or some habits I learned and grown into as a young boy that, so that was another whole podcast. I think we talked about that. But I want to go back to now, for me, I remember starting to deal with what I needed. And here's an example is before I stepped into some of this, I had moved to Nashville. Funny story. I moved to Nashville, and I was pretty athletic and I'd done a lot of things, but I'd never played golf, and everybody around here was playing golf. Okay. And that's kind of how you got to hang out with guys, is you had to go out and play golf. And so I said, I'm going to pick this up. I feel like I can pick up a golf club and learn how to play. So I started trying to pick up golf. And I was good enough to play, but I wasn't as good as the guys I was playing with. But I was learning, and I liked it. It was funny. But I remember when I started dealing with some of this, I actually decided to put away my golf clubs. This was 20 years ago. And I don't know if I swung them maybe one time in 20 years, because here's the choice I made, Phil. I realized that I did have a need for self-care and replenishment. But here's how I said to myself, when I go play golf, I actually spend 3.5 hours feeling bad about myself.
Golf will do that.
Golf will do that. And I remember thinking, it's not a bad thing. Golf's not bad. I got some really good friends that are great golfers, and every time I'm with them, I wish I could play with them. I kind of go, man, maybe pick up your clubs, Jeff. Like, go pick it back up again so you can play with these guys. And then I go, nah, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You're not going to do that. But the choice was made to go, I need to find something right now in my life that actually does replenish me, that is more caring for me right now. And it's not to go spend 3.5 hours hoping for 3 times I hit the ball flush and it feels really good to me. I got to find some other things that nourish me. And at the time, I remember going, I had a bunch of young kids, and I thought, I don't have half a days to just be away from my family. So what's it look like for me to get what I need that's also like that I can go home to offer something to my family, and I don't come home pissed off because I just played 18 holes of golf and, I'm not Tiger Woods.
Yeah. Well, that is an important distinction that is a whole episode or 10 around, the word these days is self-care.
Self-care.
Right? And so how do we do that? How do we do that in a healthy way, mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually?
Yeah.
Great topic and very much on the radar these days, especially with work and how work operates these days and all. And I just think back to as we round out kind of this idea we're talking about today, I think back to what Jesus says in Luke chapter 9, both deny yourself, take up my cross daily, follow me, and then turning toward Jerusalem, literally and emotionally and historically, moving toward that. And then what he does when he gets to Jerusalem, I think is a great place for us to land today. And notice how one of the first things he does is he reminds these men in a very experiential manner how needy they are. He washes their feet. And Peter just is repelled by that. No. And then Jesus kind of sets him straight, and won't go through the rest of that narrative. But all the way through, if you clip over from Luke to John 13, which has a much greater kind of comprehensive coverage of that whole kind of teaching block there, John 13 through 17, 5 chapters cover an outgrowth of what Jesus is talking about in Luke 9 about denying self, taking up a cross, and following him. Like, hey guys, serve one another. The serving part is way easier than the being served.
Yes. In fact, have you ever had your feet washed?
One time.
And what's easier, washing someone's feet or having your feet washed?
Not close.
It's almost intolerable.
Yes.
The vulnerability.
Yes.
And then Jesus said to Peter, look, if you can't take this,
yes,
you're going to miss it.
Yes.
And then what's Peter say?
Well, then wash all of me.
Then wash all of me.
Hose me down.
Wash all of me. You're going to have to, Bob, you're going to go wash some feet, but for you to go wash, this is a great way to end. If you're going to go be a foot washer, you better be able to tolerate having someone wash your feet.
And that is a great segue to self-care.
Yeah.
Being cared for. So that we mustn't lose. We mentioned earlier the word context there. Texas means, a weaving.
Yeah.
Notice what Jesus is weaving, what the biblical writers are weaving for us in the territory of the denial of self, which is really ego and false roles, down to then what is the living out of doing that thing? And one of the answers is taking care of self, not propping up ego. And John 13 through 17 is a beautiful picture of how that plays out.
Yeah. Denying yourself does not mean denying your humanity.
That's right.
Or your neediness.
Yes. Yes.
It does mean deny the thing in you that doesn't want to be human and doesn't want to be needy, and you're going to miss everything if you can't be those things.
That's exactly right. And what Jesus confronted Peter about when he washed his feet.
There you go. Let's pick this up in another one.
All right.
Thanks again for joining us on Return to Heart. To access resources mentioned on this program or to find out more about Tin Man Ministries, please go to tinman.org.